Thank you again so much for joining us for the photography department's first visiting artist lecture of the fall 2020 semester. It is my pleasure to reintroduce Rosalind Fox Solomon to the Yale School of Art, who last spoke in conversation with Todd Papageorge here in 1989. For the past 45 years, Fox Solomon has created challenging bodies of work and is celebrated for her exceptional portraiture and unflinching gaze at human vulnerability. Though she came to photography later than most, first picking up an Instamatic camera at the age of 38, Fox Solomon has had an incredibly prolific and sprawling career. A student of the photographer Lisette Model, who is known for her confrontational images of New York City's street life, Fox Solomon, over many decades, has photographed extensively in the Global South, Central America, India, and Poland, as well in places closer to home, like New York and the American South. Her work, however, is often metaphorical, transcending mere descriptions of place and time. Rosalind's images mine the surreal embedded in the ordinary and are a testament to some of the most important moments in our history. From documenting segregation in the Jim Crow South, to the struggles facing people in the West Bank, to destigmatizing the lives of those living with AIDS in the 80s, Fox Solomon's photographs bring to light the sorrow, the absurdity, and the beauty of strife. Books of her photographs include Chapalingus, Polish Shadow, Them, Got to Go, and Liberty Theater. She's the recipient of a Guggenheim Foundation Award, a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, and received the ICP Infinity Award for Lifetime Achievement in 2019. She most recently focused her energies on building a website 52 years in the making, which you can now visit at rosalindfoxsolomon.com. And Rosalind currently lives and works in New York, but we're thrilled to have her here, if only in the virtual realm. So with that, I hand it over to Rosalind.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for all that you've arranged, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. I want to also thank my studio manager, Marion Misselum, for handling the in-house tech and listening to the presentation as it developed. I'm happy to be here at Yale again. When you asked me to speak about the trajectory of my work in photography, I mentioned that to my publisher, Michael Mack, and I told him that I didn't want to do it. And he asked me why. I was embarrassed. I didn't answer him because the answer was that I thought the subject was much too complicated. But then I decided to take up the challenge. In order to speak honestly about the trajectory of my work, I must speak about my personal life. This is a draft. Here is part of my story. Mother and Daddy were 20 and 21 when they had me. They liked to party. I cramped their style. Mother dreamt of having a beautiful and popular daughter. She took me weekly to a manicurist to help me stop biting my nails, but that did not help. I bit them down to the quick. I licked my lips too much and I stretched my neck. At 15, I began to smoke and I gave up my other foul habits. Smile, my little dolly, she says, your face won't crack. She wants a social butterfly. I'm a bookworm. I close my bedroom door so I can read in quiet. She throws open the door and orders, you stop reading, go outside and play. I masked myself to try to be the daughter my mother wanted. Father says, if I were a young man walking behind you and saw your butt, I wouldn't look at your face. Western Union delivered a wire. He asked for my ring size. If you won't marry me, he said, I'm going to marry Paula. We barely knew one another. I lived in Chicago, and he lived in Chattanooga. In our wedding book, Bob, my husband's friend, looks very sad. He came with us to the opening of a group show. 3 of my pictures were hung. That night, Bob went home and hung himself. At 24, I am in a hospital bed. My abdomen has been slit and sewn up for the second time in a year and a half. A stream of relatives and friends barge in. By the 3rd day, I'm crying, I'm cracking, I'm hurting. I don't want any of these people around me. They expect a sunshiny face and small talk, but I'm about to croak. Finally, a no visitor sign appears on my door. They sedate me and I sleep. Eight days after the birth of my son, the doctor comes in with the clippers. A group of old men arrive. I sit up in bed holding my beautiful baby. The ceremony begins and my son is taken from my arms. My perfect, sweet, untainted newborn is passed around to those old men. Yahweh has decreed this must be. My husband tested positive for the hereditary kidney disease. His mother, aunts, and uncles had died with blood poisoning caused by loss of kidney function. I worried for the rest of our married life about how the condition would affect him. And I worried about whether we had passed it along to our children. When my son was 24, he had a bleeding attack. He was diagnosed with polycystic kidneys. For 7 years, I had been placing international visitors in Chattanooga. I was working to expand the program and find hosts in other communities. The night of the annual meeting of the Experiment in International Living, I was late for the event, for I had been in Birmingham speaking to someone who was interested in establishing the program there. I grabbed an empty seat next to a woman I did not know. She bent toward me and whispered in my ear, "What orphanage have you chosen for your children?" During my 30s, I worked to expand an international exchange program in the southern United States. But it was time for me to move on. I've been doing it for 7 years. The head of the organization offered me the position of National Public Relations Director. I could do most of the work remotely with occasional trips to the national headquarters in Vermont. My husband said, "If you take that job, I will divorce you." We had 2 young children. I was a wimp. I turned down the opportunity and I quit my job. I believed that each person had the capacity to affect change in race relations and international relations. In 1963, when Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial, I was there. I had come to Washington to be interviewed by the director of the Equal Employment Office of the Agency for International Development. I was hired as one of 12 part-time recruiter consultants. I traveled to Black colleges all over the South, talking to faculty and student groups about overseas job opportunities. The assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy were devastating. The impact of the murders made me question the ability of an individual to work effectively for changes in society. I was depressed and turned inward and found in photography a means of expression for personal and public concerns. After the assassinations and the horrors of USA involvement in the Vietnam War, I determined to mine my thoughts and feelings, allowing them directly or metaphorically to be the essence of my work. In 1970, I converted a garden shed into a darkroom and began taking pictures with intent. The death of this landmark train station suited my dark state of mind. During a visit to New York in the early 70s, Lisette Model met me in my hotel room. She had asked me to bring all of the work I had done. I packed 2 suitcases of prints. Lisette arrived at 6 o'clock. By midnight, we were still looking and we were both exhausted. She agreed to see me periodically when I could get to New York. On those occasions, Lisette always spent a half hour talking to me about her professional life and her opinions about various editors, dealers, and photographers. Then she would look at my work. At first, I really didn't like that half an hour, but I finally realized that no matter what she told me, I gained something from it. Lisette Model told me I had unique vision and said that I must make photography my priority. She was strong and convincing. I had never known a woman with so much confidence and conviction. I took her advice. Because I was 38 when I picked up a camera, it was helpful for me to learn about Auche, who began photographing at 40, and Julia Margaret Cameron, who began her work at 50. My husband encouraged me to buy fashionable clothes, and he never complained about the bills. However, when I expanded my darkroom, he balked. Whenever I bought a new piece of equipment, he said I was spending too much. Lisette Model critiqued my work intermittently. She said to me, "Buy whatever you need. You must take your work as a photographer seriously." In 1976, I discovered a monthly 3-day flea market around the outside of the courthouse square in Scottsboro, Alabama. It was only an hour or so from Chattanooga. Scottsboro, as some of you may know, is notorious for a trial that falsely accused a group of Black teenagers of raping a woman on a train. They languished in jail for years, and finally, very late, they were exonerated. In 1976, I interviewed a farmer, Mr. Bailey, and this is what he had to say about the Scottsboro market. I tell my buddies, boys, you ought to go to Scottsboro. You'll see every kind of people there is in the United States. Every kind they ever did or ever will have. You'll see them over there. You'll see ugly ones, sharp ones, foolish people, and everything else. And on top of that, you can see them sitting around whittling. You can go around one side and there'll be whittling cedar. And then you can go around the other side and there'll be a preaching. Keep going round and you'll see more. There'll be a swapping guns and dogs and this and that and the other. It's amusing to go there. It's a sight. At 40, I'd had a total hysterectomy. After 20 years of marriage, my husband and I had little in common. His illness was changing his personality. I felt trapped. Early on in Scottsboro, I photographed animals, Shirley Temple buttons, evangelists preaching, and depression glass. Then I focused on battered dolls in boxes or on tables, thrown every which way, and plastic mannequins. They reflected the feelings churning around in my gut and echoed my state of mind. Artifice and pretense kept many couples together. They hid misery behind put-on smiles. My husband, my son, and my daughter all worked to elect Jimmy Carter president. President Carter appointed my husband as administrator of the General Services Administration. We moved to Washington, D.C. In Washington, I took pictures outside of the White House, and I also photographed artists and politicians. My husband and I went to Guatemala for a brief vacation. Then I went back there several times, taking pictures of shamans, landscapes, farmers, and the elite. Working in Guatemala was a relief from living as her husband's wife. participating in a life of pretense and power plays that was normal in Washington political circles. I wanted to be recognized as my own person. I am a photographer. I needed to create an alternative life. In Guatemala, I began it. I photographed the idyllic landscape and began a series of ritual pictures, looking for insights to understand how others manage to survive. I always wanted to see and understand the world. I studied international relations and had an interest in learning about different cultures. I went to Ancash, Peru, when I learned that there were remnants of an earthquake there. I went specifically because the earthquake was a metaphor for the emotional turbulence in my life. I wanted a divorce, but I did not yet have the courage to initiate it. I moved deeper into my work as I faced an uncertain future. This picture shows a woman who is about to emerge from a trance. She's participating in a candomblé initiation ceremony. A deity will enter her brain and give her a new name. She will jump up and shout out her name. She is reincarnated and will make a new life. I traveled to India as a fellow of the American Institute of Indian Studies. In Kolkata, I met and photographed the revered filmmaker, Satyajit Ray, on the second day I was there. But a primary subject matter for me in Calcutta became the voluptuous sculpture that radiates female power. I saw the sculpture as relating, for me, relating to my early 70s pictures of broken and crazed dolls. However, instead of downtrodden female symbols, the goddess sculpture brings to life a special energy. In their raw state, this sculpture emanates vitality and power. I was finished with broken dolls. In Calcutta, I began to recognize my own strength. We had been married for 30 years. I wanted a separation. He said, "We will live together or we will divorce." I suggested that he go out with a divorced friend who had always loved and admired him. They married the day after our divorce was final. I moved to an artist co-op in Manhattan to start anew. Throughout my years in New York, I photographed a nearby Washington Square Park. I've also made portraits of people in various situations around the city. When I heard about the rampant illness that was killing dozens of gay young men in New York. I felt kinship with them because of my son's progressive kidney disease. People believed that you could catch the AIDS virus by being in the same room with someone who was infected, though it could only be transmitted sexually. There was talk of isolating them like people with Hansen's disease, that's leprosy, like people thinking that they should be banished to islands or colonies. Each week for 9 months, I met and photographed at least 2 people with HIV or AIDS. Though I usually photograph in silence, this time was different. When I went to photograph them in their homes, I listened. Then they talked and I talked. I learned about their lives, about the friends, family, and lovers who sometimes had abandoned them. They shared their deepest concerns. Then they allowed me to take their pictures. I was so immersed in the project that I could not spend time with old friends. I was obsessed with what I was experiencing, and I could not speak or think of anything else. There was no cure. They died one after another. This is Jeff and his friend, an interview that I made from him. Radiation is dehumanizing. I now know firsthand what it is like to be irradiated. With that realization, you begin to cry when you think of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I grew up on a farm, and the only time we drew on animals was after they were sides of beef. So I have that association, that I'm a piece of meat too to be drawn upon. Taping a head to a board for treatment seems very primitive. It seems like you're being tied into place to be tortured. In South Africa during apartheid, I could not photograph outside because I might have been arrested as a foreign agitator. I photographed anyone who would let me. I learned that when I see someone through the focusing screen of my camera, anyone is interesting. But I had to shoot only in private spaces. I had to be sociable and work at the same time. That was difficult for me. Making pictures that go beneath the surface requires opposing emotions, a deep involvement, and at the same time, a level of detachment, neither of which is involved in casual social contact. It was pitch dark. The township was 15 miles away from Durban, where I was staying in a hotel. During the riots, witness had seen a man's body smoldering on the curb near his house. We would be in trouble if the police found me there with him. They would be sure that I had come to incite people against the government. I slumped down in the seat so no one would see me. Witness said, "No, don't do that." David, an American with a trust fund, believed that he was the God King of Cambodia. In a seance with a visionary, he was told that he was an incarnation of the king who built the temple complex, Angkor Wat. Richard, a young Cambodian, met my plane. He was to help me with formalities to enable me to obtain a visa. I was nervous when I arrived in the airport with false papers introducing me as a United Nations peace observer. Travelers could not enter the country at that time. The only way I could get into Cambodia was with false documents. My letter was addressed to the foreign minister, and it said that I was there to help arrange elections. I received an invitation to the palace for Prince Sihanouk's birthday celebration. I attended with the royal family, the monks, and the military. In Belgrade, flying through the air, pieces of legs and bodies, no instruments to repair the spines, only brandy for the pain. I walked down the street near the hotel to the Museum of Decorative Arts. There, the dead have been photographed. They are displayed in giant color photos, dirty, bloody skulls, piled 6 feet high. No one believes that I'm doing this work for art. Think Goya's The Disasters of War. Everyone worries about what I will do with the pictures. It's stressful facing constant suspicion, and amazing the power with which people credited me. In Bosnia, soldiers allowed me to take pictures. They were drinking enough to be loose, but they weren't rowdy yet. When I allowed myself to think about their murders and rapes, I wanted to run away and collapse. I went to Belfast with the intention of photographing the children of war. The fighting between Protestants and Catholics was ongoing. I photographed in war-torn countries and in countries with racial and religious injustice. Vietnam. In Vietnam, I was thinking about Agent Orange. I needed a break from these difficult projects, so I went to New Orleans to photograph during Mardi Gras. I rented an unfurnished apartment in the French Quarter and slept on a sofa. from 1988 until 2003, I began going to Poland. I felt it important to continue commenting on recurring ethnic violence in the world. I made portraits of people and visited Auschwitz and Treblinka, where millions of Jews were murdered in gas chambers. This place was a commission project for work in Israel. The project included 12 internationally known photographers. I photographed Israelis, Palestinians, Africans, and Christian pilgrims. Them is a book of my pictures and text published by Michael Mack Books in 2014. It was random, going to this place or that. One person led to another. I tried to reach their souls through mine. Hurts and wounds, confrontation and welcome. Schism between artist and subject. The tug of empathy and rejection. Positive and negative reflected in my lens. These excerpts are from my book, Them. They are things that I heard. You have a narrative you don't understand. It's all because of them. Any one of them would eat my heart out if they could find it. Cut off their heads, toss them into a fire. I dream of being in the army with my friends again. I don't know if I killed anyone. I wasn't the one to drag them out. Parts Have Got to Go, which is published also by Michael Mack. Parts of the book are drawn, I use text in the book, and parts of them were drawn from my mother's sayings and my father's behavior. In general, from my confusions and fears as a child and later. In recent years, I have begun to realize that my concept, the concept of myself as an outsider, has led me to leave my comfort zone and put myself in the position of a stranger who has to gain acceptance in order to work. Mother says, youth is my God. I hate age. Everything is such an effort. Last time before they operated on me, I ate Hershey bars, 30 of them. Then I found out that I have diabetes. No Hershey's tonight, boo-hoo. Nothing can help me now but a new leg. Hip, hip, hooray. In a few days, I'll be a dead ass. There will be no more tomorrow. The title of the book, Liberty Theater, it was the ironic name of a theater for non-whites who were not allowed to attend other theaters. Before the 1964 Civil Rights Law, segregation was legally enforced in Tennessee. The title relates to performance and pretense in the theater of life. In Peru, the blind church accordionist and her brother, the tailor, dedicated a song to me. Today you are here, tomorrow you'll be gone. Day after tomorrow, who knows where you'll be?
Thank you so much, Rosalind. That was great.